with respect to the level of threat and the intelligence information that you were receiving, is it fair to say that in the summer of 2001, the threat level either approached or exceeded anything that you had previously been receiving?
Well, I think it exceeded anything that George Tenet or I had ever seen.
And I think the phrase which has received some currency in our hearings of someone's hair being on fire originated with you, saying that basically you knew that something drastic was about to happen and that the indicators were all consistent in that regard.
That's right.
Did you make a determination that the threat was going to come from abroad as an exclusive proposition, or did you understand that given the fact that we had been attacked before and that plans had been interrupted to attack us before, that the potential existed for al-Qaeda to strike at us on our homeland?
The CIA said in their assessments that the attack would most likely occur overseas, most probably in Saudi Arabia, possibly in Israel. I thought, however, that it might well take place in the United States based on what we had learned in December '99 when we rolled up operations in Washington State, in Brooklyn, in Boston. The fact that we didn't have intelligence that we could point to that said it would take place in the United States wasn't significant in my view, because frankly, sir, I know how this is going to sound, but I have to say it, I didn't think the FBI would know whether or not there was anything going on in the United States by al-Qaeda.
Well, the FBI was the principal agency upon which you had to rely. Is that not the case?
It is.
Now, with respect to what you were told, you were the principal coordinator for counterterrorism for the chief executive flowing up and down through you, correct?
Yes, sir.
Did you know that the two individuals who had been identified as al-Qaeda had entered the United States and were presently thought to be in the country?
I was not informed of that, nor were senior levels of the FBI.
Had you known that these individuals were in the country, what steps, with the benefit of hindsight, but informed hindsight, would you have taken given the level of threat?
To put the answer in a context, I had been saying to the FBI and to the other federal law enforcement agencies and to the CIA that because of this intelligence that something was about to happen, that they should lower their threshold of reporting, that they should tell us anything that looked the slightest bit unusual. In retrospect, having said that over and over again to them, for them to have had this information somewhere in the FBI and not told me, I still find absolutely incomprehensible.
Was the information with respect to Moussaoui and his erratic behavior in flight school ever communicated to you?
Not to me.
And given the fact that there was a body of information with respect to the use of planes as weapons in the intelligence community's knowledge, had you received information about Moussaoui training to fly a commercial airplane, would that have had some impact on the kind of efforts which might be made to protect commercial aviation?
I don't know. The information to which you refer, information in the intelligence community's knowledge about al-Qaeda having thought of using aircraft as weapons, that information was old, relatively speaking, 5 years, 6 years old, hadn't reoccurred, to my knowledge, during those 5 or 6 years, and has to be placed, to give the intelligence community a break, it has to be placed in the context of the other intelligence reports. The volume of intelligence reports on this kind of thing, on al-Qaeda threats and other terrorist threats, was in the tens of thousands, probably hundreds of thousands over the course of the 5 or 6 years. Now, in retrospect, to go back and find a report 6 years earlier that said perhaps they were going to use aircraft as weapons, it's easy to do now, but I think the intelligence community analysts can be forgiven for not thinking about it, given the fact that they hadn't seen a lot in the 5 or 6 years intervening about it, and that there were so many reports about so many other things.
And yet an FAA advisory went out. The FAA advised on the potential for domestic hijackings.
I asked them to.
And had you known on top of that that there was a jihadist who was identified, apprehended in the United States before 9/11, who was in flight school, acting erratically.
I would like to think, sir, that even without the benefit of 20/20 hindsight, I could have connected those dots.
Thank you.
Let me ask you, just specific to the use of airplanes as a weapon, because it seems so obvious, and again, it seemed obvious. Fully disclosed, it seemed so obvious after the fact. I mean, it was such a simple and easy strategy that was put in place. But in your case, in '96 with the Olympics, you raised a concern about a small Cessna being used to attack the Olympics in Atlanta. During the Millennium Scare as well, you sent a memo to Berger discussing the possible domestic threats, and the quote is that, "Is there a threat to civilian aircraft?" In March 2001, another CSG item on the agenda mentions the possibility of alleged bin Laden interest in targeting U.S. passenger planes at the Chicago airport, end of quote. I mean, if you listen and look at the documents on the day of 9/11, it just inescapably leads to the conclusion that we were surprised by hijacking.
Well, Senator, I would distinguish between hijackings in general and hijackings that then turn the aircraft into suicide weapons. Been hijackings by terrorists going back for 20, 25 years. And the United States had some programs in place to deal with that. In 1996, after the TWA 800 crash, the President appointed a commission on aircraft safety and security that looked at whether we needed to augment our protection against hijacking. And it made several recommendations. Most of those recommendations were carried out, not all of them. One of the things it rejected was federalizing the aircraft searching process that is now done by the Transportation Security Agency, because it would have cost so much money and it would have required such a big federal bureaucracy. At the time, when there had been no recent hijacking, I assume that commissioners on that commission thought they were making the right recommendation. Many of their recommendations for increased security, however, were carried out. But as to your question about using aircraft as weapons, I was afraid, beginning in 1996, not that a Cessna would fly into the Olympics, but that any size aircraft would be put into the Olympics. And during my inspection of the Atlanta security arrangements a month or two before the Games, I was shocked that the FBI hadn't put into effect any aircraft air defense security arrangements. So I threw together an air defense for the Atlanta Games somewhat quickly, but I got an air defense system in place. We then tried to institutionalize that for Washington to protect the Capitol and the White House. And that system would have been run by the Secret Service. It would have involved missiles, anti-aircraft guns, radar, helicopters. Secret Service developed all the plans for that. Secret Service was a big advocate for it, but they were unable to get the Treasury Department, in which they were then located, to approve it. And I was unable to get the Office of Management and Budget to fund it.